And we are live, coming to you live from the Red Scare TV studio. I have my friend Dust James. Dust is a longtime streamer, avid Marxist, and I believe a truck driver.
Yeah, yes, sir.
I have my friend. Oh,
you got an echo there, man.
Sorry about that.
I this YouTube stuff's new to me. I've been doing it about a year. I've been doing YouTube about a year now, but I'm a long-time activist and theorist.
I've been doing this since 2015. I've seen changes come and go. I am active when I can be. I've attended rallies, Black Lives Matter rallies. I'm currently writing a new book, which I've titled the Guidebook to New America, kind of like solving the contradictions of America in hopes that, we can create a more unified movement. Because whenever I think about the problems in America, I go back to something former premier of France, Charles de Gaulle, once said, "How do you govern a country of 69 flavors of cheese?" And that's kind of our situation here, is that there's a lot of, running contradictions. There's a lot of upheaval, and not every part of America is the same. So how do you bring together that all under a socialist nation and make it stable and prosperous?
Damn, you hit me with a theory right off the get-go, man. Man, that's like a long time away. We gotta build some kind of power to stop all the fucking bloodshed.
Well, we do, but I also think that, we need to start formulating these ideas, because the problem is that there's nothing wrong with having multiple ideas, but I think we need to start solidifying this into an actual idea, which we can make into a movement, start making into collectives, and then start actually gaining some actual power. Because the problem is that, I think there's too much Marxism per se. You have the Marxist, Leninist, Maoists, and then you have, old school Marxists. And it's like, let's synthesize these ideas, bring them together, and start an actual movement, and, start like an actual party. Because let's be real, in my opinion, I think a lot of these parties, while some of them have some good theory, not all of them have a lot of good action. They aren't actually, in the workplace. They're usually fighting the culture war, which is getting nowhere. You actually need to get into the workplace to actually start an actual proletarian movement.
I gotcha. I wish it was too much, Mark. I mean, you can get stuff on Facebook and YouTube and what have you, but if you go in a workplace, people don't know what a communist is, or barely met a communist. It's
I've actually had some success in my workplace. We're a very niche industrial part. We make industrial garage doors like you'd see at like airports or like military bases. It's a very niche market. We're only one of the few people around the world who actually do this type of thing. And so, there's a very good power base that I'm trying to form here. We're talking about unionizing currently. And they like my ideas, but the idea of organizing scares them, because they're afraid of the temp agencies rolling people in and just replacing them. So that's a problem that I'm having currently, is, the fight with the temp agencies. Because if you really look at it, temp agencies are really just there to stop unionization and keep people shuffled everywhere.
Yeah, temp agencies are a big thing, man. I think if you go back to like the 90s, they were like 5% of the workplace. Now they're like 30% of the workplace. Less rights, harder to unionize, often lower wages, and it completely gets rid of job security.
Oh, it does. We've had guys at my factory, and they know how to do the job, right? They know how to do the job, but then they don't get it after their promised 90 days. So they move on to the next temp agency. So we're also losing a lot of experience, and that's put us back, I think, 4 to 5 months in production.
So there's a point where the class war, the policies of the class war, them against us, is actually hurting that local company.
Yeah.
So that's yeah, man. Almost every job I did, I went to college 4 or 5 years, major in history, and I didn't finish, but that's another story. But I learned a lot. Got involved in activism quite a bit. That was kind of my main job. This was like the Obama era, Occupy, shit like that. But anyways, almost every summer job and in between semesters, every job I had was a temp agency job. I worked about every single job in town: cosmetics, poultry processing, meat packing, construction, landscaping, and the majority of it was through temp agencies.
And
that's
it
all you can find.
It robs you of any stability because I've talked to the temps. I'm hired in, but I've talked to these temps, and it's like, I don't know what I'm going to do if I don't get hired in, because I was promised a wage increase and everything, and a lot of my life is riding on this, and it's not a way to live. It's terrible. I was in a temp agency, and I soon figured out what it was all about. I was working in a factory where the OSHA fines were just stacking because the union becomes so weak. So they, because they brought in this temp agency, and, just kind of the conflict that was happening there, because the union would steal my punch card so that I wouldn't get paid. And, I think that temp agencies should be made illegal.
Yeah, hell yeah. That's a great demand. Great demand amongst a bunch of others. Get people talking and do what we can. Shit.
No, it's, and I'm just, when one of my demands that I'm trying to get across to these people, that what we need to demand for is, the immediate hiring in of every temp. That way we have experience stays. And also we have a very good control on what is happening in the workforce. Because the thing is, we have a very incompetent plant manager who basically he's just in it for the money. The last company he was running, it was a railway company, and it went under. So we're kind of just wondering if, the Japanese company that owns us is just put them here so that they can put the plane under and move it to Osaka or something, or, but we want, one of our immediate demands that we're thinking about doing is having him removed and trying to have one of us elected into the position of the plant manager, because otherwise, if this factory goes under, the county which that's in is already suffering a lot. I don't know if you saw the documentary I did, but Wayne County is a very hard hit place. I call it a sacrifice zone. And it used to be a very labor aristocratic place. Now it's mostly filled with lumpen proletarian. There's a lot of crime in the area. And if this place were to go under, the Wayne County area, if this place were to go under, the entire Wayne County area would it would be a major punch in the gut. Things would just get worse around here. The opioid epidemic get around here. And that's one thing I'm trying to stress to these people is, if you don't try to make it better now, it's going to be worse for the children that you're trying to provide for at the moment.
Yeah, you said a lot there. I think you're getting into nuts and bolts, union organizing, and also once you got a union, what to do with it. And I think you're pointing at the difference between a democratic union and more of a top-down union. My experience with the labor movement was a student activist, helped form the Jobs with Justice Coalition in Greensboro, which tried to build working class power by linking community groups with labor unions. So if it was the CWA, I think was in there, the teachers, local OSHA was in there. And basically if one person called in, if one union called, everybody else would show up. And and I kind of got involved in some of the union struggles, but in North Carolina, there's very little union activity. It'd be good if we had a union. I always say even a corrupt union is better than no union, because that at least, even if the day-to-day ain't good, you got an insurance policy when shit hits the fan. So in that struggle, one of the major demands that a democratic union should make that socialists should push is that the least amongst you are treated better. So you need, like, a lot of unions have seniority, and that's good, but you need a bottom line for people that come in, make this. We need to get rid of temp agencies, or if we have temp agencies, they need to make X amount of dollars. Another thing I've had with being a non-union truck driver is a lot of the union shops, I think this is good, will mandate to their companies they have to pay truck drivers a certain amount. You can't be underpaying the truck drivers. And I'll be talking with these racist truck drivers who only work for Ball. The Ball Aluminum's a union company, and it's a lot of black workers. And I'll have racist truck drivers go in there and be like, man, these fucking lazy union N-words, all that crap. And I'm like, why are you working for Ball? And they're like, Ball pays the most I can find around these parts. And it's like the reason why Ball pays that much because those black workers put a mandate in the union contract to pay the truck drivers. I mean, it's it's hard, man. The struggle's real.
Oh no, and I see it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and there's like a lot of backwards thinking with unions because people blame the unions for all all the industry going away, but it's like no, it's the fact that the bourgeoisie didn't want to pay out of pocket for more wages, so they started investing in the third world countries and started more imperialism into these third world countries, started putting that there, and then we all got left of all the shitty service sector jobs.
Yeah, I mean, I've gone over what you're describing. I think people try to. There's all these like bourgeois liberal kind of terms, but I think a lot of it comes down to the technology, the transition from basically from analog to digital, from the diode and the tube technology and the diode to the microprocessor, is what allowed the computing systems for international shipping. It wasn't like the millionaires or the bourgeoisie, the elites got together and said, "Oh man, I got an idea. Let's move these jobs overseas." No, the technology made it possible for global shipping, global shipping patterns, and a computing made it possible for a different type of management systems. So the technology made it possible for them to do it, and then you got further automation. You also have this thing with China's interesting. A lot of jobs are going to China, and they made an interesting deal. There was absolute poverty before the Dengist reforms. And they basically, my understanding, they traded for investment in their country, but they were able to hold on. They were able to hold on to their sovereignty and build themselves up and do what's good for the country. Now, there was exploitation that happened, but it was basically what they were forced into. There's a lot of criticisms. I agree with a lot of the criticisms from the Maoists, but a lot of these criticisms from the Trotskyites and the anarchists are just CIA repeats. Yeah. So, and that's when you get into this stuff, and it's like kind of difficult. So how do you talk to a reactionary worker who's xenophobic towards China, saying China's stealing all the jobs? How do you explain to them, well, they're trying to do the best they can, and it is these rich fuckers here that let the jobs go off there so they can make more money because they don't need us no more? I mean, that's
oh no, that's the discussion that every class conscious worker needs to have in their workplace of why jobs went away, why the situation is right now. Because one of the problems I'm having with my coworkers is they're like, they're all blaming it on the Japanese who own the company, because before, the company I was working for was completely run by the Amish. And then, the Amish sold it and the Japanese bought it up. So they're blaming this all on the Japanese, but it's like, it's deeper than some, racial, bullshit or some national identity. It comes down to capitalism and how it's taking away all the jobs and replacing them in areas that's cheaper.
What state you out of?
Ohio. One of the worst places you could ever be.
I know. Isn't it mostly Mennonites? More Mennonites than Amish folks.
I can't say for certain. In fact,
I used to deliver lumber quite a bit to a lot of Mennonite businesses, and they're interesting community organizations. They actually help keep wealth in the community. A lot of people come backwards. They got some issues, but that's an interesting play, in rural communities, especially in Ohio and other places.
Yeah, I can't say for certain if there's more Mennonites than Amish. I would probably say there's more Amish because then again, the Amish are more identifiable than the Mennonites. You could see them more, out in the public. I guess you could say where someone who's Mennonite, you might just confuse them for being Amish, but
yeah.
But yeah, no, and I'm having some minor successes. I've been talking my department and just walking out on Saturdays and Sundays, for the most part. Not to the point where we're all going to get fired, but on certain days it's like, hey, don't you got this, that, the third to do for your kid? Don't they have like a ball game or something today to do? It's like, yeah, they do. And it's like, okay, well, we all don't need to be here. Let's go. And people are starting to feel that power, and they're starting to feel that hey, I can start choosing my own destiny, and they love that.
Right on, man. Yeah, I mean, the struggles here I've had in the workplace are kind of crazy. I used to work in this sweatshop at Cody. It's a cosmetics industry. And shit, I'm in the South, and there's interesting cultural stuff going on. There was a wave of migrants from Mexico in the mid-'90s, about the same time my family got here from upstate New York. And so a lot of my friends growing up have been Mexican migrants. They've had a big influence on me. But the way that worked out in the factory it was interesting. This sweatshop, there was very few white workers in this sweatshop. It was mostly black and brown folks. But a lot of the black folks had gotten line leader positions, and a lot of the documented and undocumented recent immigrants were the regular workers. And and they were basically made to work more shifts. And then like the few white people there, people were like, oh, these are trash folks, trying to say. And it was like it's all these cultural dynamics. And, and there was so much racism. Like a lot of the people I went to school with would go there for summer jobs. And then they show up and they'd be like, oh, you know so much English and blah, blah, blah. And there was so much race and all this bullshit. But there was also like, I know there's like unspoken rules about stuff. And I think there was this one time where they kept trying to steal my wages. Essentially, this line leader said, at the end of the day, you got to here's your responsibilities. I was hourly. And at the end of the day, you got to do this, this, and this, and that, and put this pallet in this place. Well, it turns out they were giving us 15 minutes to clock out. And what they can do is legally, they can move that clock back to the 15-minute period. Right? So the bell would ring at a certain time. You got 15 minutes to clock out, and any of those 15 minutes are going to count. It's going to revert back to that period. So they made sure you clocked out. So I learned this. And at the end, at one time, all I had to do for my responsibilities, move this pallet from one side to the other. As soon as the bell rang, I dropped the pallet and left it in the middle of the floor. And then this line leader's coming over to me. Hey, what are you doing? What are you doing? You didn't finish your responsibilities. What's going on? And then she went to go get the lady, the boss, the floor boss, this middle-aged white lady. She comes over to me and she's like, why didn't you finish your responsibilities? And I was saying, I was like, I do not tolerate wage theft. Please tell the supervisor, or please tell the line leader that she cannot make me work past the bell because that's illegal. And then the supervisor talked with her and told her exactly what I just said. And then the next day I show up for work and she's like, if you so smart, why are you working here? was what happened the next day. But
oh god, that kind of sounds like I was working for a place called Artiflex, and this is where I was getting my punch card stolen by the union. But the union, and this is one problem I don't want the union that I'm trying to develop to form into, is the fact that they couldn't unionize. So the place was just an absolute, not unionize, sorry, they couldn't strike. It was in your union clause that you cannot strike. But it was an absolute just hellhole. Last I checked about 2 years ago, they had a total of $220,000 in OSHA fines. Most of the people there are running around without a finger, or either that, or like the tip of their fingers missing.
What kind of job was this?
Made car parts. For example, the factory actually made parts for the Oscar Mayer wiener truck.
Okay.
But, it was an absolute hellhole. And, the union, they would just go up and talk to the supervisors and be like, hey, you got to be more careful. People are getting hurt. And, the supervisors would be like, yeah, okay, sure. And, the supervisor to get fired and they just rotate another supervisor in. But, and I was like, well, why don't we just strike? First off, you're not the union. Second off, we have a clause you can't strike. And I was like, well, why do you guys even have a union? Well, it keeps the wages up. And it's like, well, this is bullshit. No one should be here to work this. And they kind of gave me the same spiel they gave me. Why are you even here to begin with? Like,
Yeah. Yeah. That's the culture of the capitalist system that not only we internalize, but we start to impose on other people. Where it's like, well, if you're not working this amount, we're all being exploited. But if you're not working this amount, if you ain't got 3 jobs, if you're not doing all you can to provide for your family, then you're the loser. You're the one who's fucked up. It's your fault. We start internalizing and then mandating these positions of capitalism on each other. It becomes the morality of the people, the bourgeois exploitation of the people. We start pushing on each other.
Yeah, and this goes back into individualism, which is one the root of capitalism. And it's like I was telling my one coworker, and I was like, "Look, man, you're all about your individualist mindset. But if you want to see the real effects of individualism, look outside and go towards Worcester, Ohio, where it's they're expanding the jail because they keep getting more and more drug offenders in because there's no jobs, there's no real the only thing that you can do is escape and drugs and shit, and everything's just gone to shit because there's this fuck you, you're not me and you're not my family, why do I care about you mentality,
Yeah, they get us against each other. Racism, class, it's so fucking bad that people making in my town, like, shit, if you can make $10-12 an hour, the rent's a little cheaper in other places, but you're like, oh, you're doing good. So I see these people making like 12, 13, even $14 an hour, looking down on people that make $8 an hour, like they're somehow better than them. Like those people making $8 an hour didn't work hard enough or didn't do this or there's some reason why they're fucked up. And they're not making any more than these people. Their standard of living is like minusculely better compared to people fucking us. It's ridiculous.
And another thing we need to stress to people is like, yeah, okay, your wage might be good right now. That $20 hour wage that you're working at United Steel right now, that's pretty good, man. I wish I was having that. But give it 10 years, the price of milk's probably going to be like $30 or something. It's not going to be the same. We can't keep within the system. We have to change it. This, that, and the third.
Right on, man. Ugh.
So anyways, where are you currently struggling with? What movements are you into right now?
Well, let's see. I've been mostly doing my YouTube show. I work a lot of hours. I did most of my activism when I was in college. And then I dropped out, started driving trucks. Since then, I was actually in between trucking jobs. I was working at this convenience store, and I went out on strike with the Fight for 15 folks. Even that was a while back. I try to go out once a year to the HK on J, which is kind of like the NAACP rally, just try to get the mood of it, get the thing of it. And I went out a few times recently for the Black Lives Matter movement. And there's been a lot of positive community building between Black churches and maybe some of the more liberal folks that didn't happen before, that were kind of disconnected. There's a little more of that. And also a lot of these Confederate statues have been coming down, which is amazing. These are outright disgusting, racist monuments honoring people who fought for slavery. And it's everyday people in a little town whose parents heard the N-word, who these places didn't desegregate until the fucking late 70s in a lot of cases. And there's still like little ways of getting around that. And I'm seeing monumental cultural change. A lot of it's symbolism, but it's still is still progress. But how we get from that, from getting folks in kind of the liberal struggle, everyday working class folks, to see it from the national question, to see it as Afro-American people have been kept down, have never really been treated as a part of this country, and to see it as building power in the Black community as well, in the working community, and get those communities to line up to build power for the oppressed in general, how to link those issues up. And I think it's important. And there's a lot to work around. There's a lot of potential.
Speaking of the Black community, do you believe that there is a suppressed Black nation? I'm not trying to like come down on you or anything.
Yes, that's my position. That is my position. I support self-determination. There's Afro-American nation, the Black Belt South, and then people who have moved from the Black Belt South have been put into urban centers, have been segregated and kept in their community, kept down, kept wages. First, I mean, regardless of what people ultimately choose, self-determination or being a part of a larger socialist thing, the materiality of a Black oppressed nation is indisputable.
All right.
Like that's a basic material condition.
And how do you think I guess you could say a diaspora come together and build like an actual national movement?
I mean, that's how I would like.
I'm not trying to say like you're an expert or anything, but I've been asking a lot of socialists this.
Yeah, I like the Black Panther movements. There's some new Black Panthers. They've been having fights recently, so I don't want to name and say the wrong one because the people are in a pressure cooker, and people are growing up with working class flaws and lumpen proletariat flaws, and we are the people, and we need to build these organizations. And I always say build power, Black power and workers' power. Black power is workers' power. So like when I worked with the Job with Justice Coalition, there was like Black community groups that would come out for the unions and vice versa. That was organizing right at the beginning of this Black Lives Matter around when Trayvon Martin got killed. We actually got the local NAACP is kind of in, they're kind of bougie and they're in with the cops and stuff. Like he's friends with the sheriff and stuff. And I was having this organization, Workers for Clean Water. It was me and two other women, Mexican immigrants. And we were trying to be the working class presence in the environmental movement, which was also bourgeois dominated. But we actually pushed the local NAACP to have a demonstration for Trayvon Martin, and they weren't going to do it. So, I mean, little stuff like that, like even like some of these local groups, some of these local petty bourgeois civil rights group will be behind or lagging behind the sentiments of the people.
And I noticed that when I was at the Black Lives Matter rally in Cleveland, I told them, hey, I want to help you. I want to work with you. I didn't tell them I was a communist. They weren't with it. What else was a couple things that I noticed? Sorry, I'm blacking out a little bit here. That was called the absent-minded professor in public education for a reason. But no, they really just seemed to fail at getting to the point of, at the root of everything that was going wrong. In fact, there seemed to be a lot of disappointed people there who would come and they're like, I don't really feel that this is representing my struggle. There seems to be a very large disconnect from, the working class and then, these petty bourgeois intellectuals who start their local BLM branch and then, they don't understand the full context of the struggle.
Yeah, if you talk with a lot of folks, like if you talk with working folks who aren't involved in the Democratic Party, you ask, I told this coworker, I'm into politics, and he's like, shit, I can't stand politics. I ain't going nowhere near that. None of them are any good for us. And I'm like, that's politics. We have the same position. You're in the non-voters.
Oh God. And I also think we need to educate our countrymen about, what's outside of our politics because they're so used to, the bipartisan split. We need to tell them that, it shouldn't, the power shouldn't come from, these two powers. It should come from us and us solely. It's like I like to say, either there's one party or no party, because this bipartisan shit is just creating like this bureaucratic sludge that's slowing down the country.
I mean, in my understanding, it's all a show to keep us divided. The Democrats focus culturally on urban America. The Republicans appeal to rural America. They both represent the bourgeoisie, maybe different sections of it, but we got rural folks who don't make shit blaming people in the city, and people in the city blaming Republican voters in the country. And when we need to find a way to unite these groups, I mean, the Soviet Union, the hammer and the sickle, represents the industrial workers and the peasants. I mean, that is what being a communist is. We need to link up rural workers with the urban workers, and link up workers in general with the struggle for oppressed nations.
And I think a part of that comes through with bypassing the culture war, not exactly partaking in the culture war, instead having people understand why the culture war exists and start focusing more on class. Not to say, oh, we need to forget about, transgender people or black people, but we need to bypass the culture war, because the culture war to me just seems to be a manufactured tool of oppression to keep us from realizing who our real enemy is.
I got you. I mean, I got a lot of flack because I'm really critical of forces like Bernie Sanders and AOC. I mean, I look at what they've been doing. I call them sheepdogs. Basically, they say like they want universal health care. They say they want this, but they going back to wars, and they tell us to vote for Joe Biden. To me, they're just another part of the show. And it was the people. It was like the masses of people who came out to different Occupy stuff and started becoming dissatisfied with the system that brought back socialism, or brought back socialism in a positive context. It wasn't Bernie Sanders. Maybe he put that on the like mainstream media page, but then he reintroduced it with all these myths and all this other bullshit that went along with it. So, I mean, my focus has always been, okay, I kind of like, I brought that up to say that I kind of like some of the stuff going on with the Movement for the People's Party, but I think Nina and her, she's basically a sheepdog in the making, or another sheepdog coming down. She's still a Democrat. She still ain't getting out of it. I mean, that's probably a controversial statement, to say the least. To me, if you're working in the Democratic Party, and you haven't been forced out like Cynthia McKinney had, then you are doing something that's against the people's interest. But one of the positions that the Movement for a People's Party says is these positions are popular. Funding education is popular. Universal health care is popular. And it turns out these basic issues that require an economic change, to require material resources to go to the people, aren't put in. But they can do all this. They can have a more diverse, oppressive capitalist imperialism. That's what gets built up. So I think we can get people around these popular demands, but I don't think Movement for a People Party is the mechanism for that, because I still think they're too linked to the Democratic Party, and the Democratic Party is one of the most evil, destructive forces on earth. They are half of the imperialist political force.
And I think that's something. I think that's something that goes back to Phil Oakes talked about in a song. You've probably heard it. "Love Me, I'm a Liberal."
Yeah,
the song's about the liberal. In the best of times, center of left, but when it affects them personally, center right. And you do see that because my family is on my dad's side, is working class, Republican. Then you go to my mom's side of the family. That's a very Democratic side of the family, and they're all about all these progressive things until it starts affecting them personally. Like when, a black neighbor, for example, moved into their suburb just a couple houses down, and it was going to bring down property values or something. And it's like, all of a sudden you're not progressive anymore. No, shut up. Stop.
Now, maybe I could just respond to, you got Tim on there. Identity politics is an unnecessary distraction. I'm not sure exactly I would say that. I would say identity politics is the twisting of the real material oppression, gender oppression, oppressed nations. It's the twisting of those struggles into these social issues that they can get gains that don't affect the material reality. if that makes any sense.
What you're saying, it's just respawning of the civil rights movement from the 60s, and that fact that it's being used kind of like as a tool, I guess you're saying, to try to create this change and then just shuffle it out the door when you don't need it
basically anymore. Is if they can put some black faces in imperialism, some women faces in capitalist oppression, they can go down with it. If they can use the correct pronouns, or they can do all this shit that doesn't actually affect the material conditions of the people. They get us to fight for stuff that's largely symbolic or largely what I'm saying is we need to fight for those material things. We need to dismantle national oppression. We need better standards of living. We need to demand health care. And one of the bigger demands, this is the March 8th is International Working Women's Day. And I think one of the big struggles that my family has is I go to work 20 hours, I come home and I'm tired. And my wife's trying to get through school. She got full-time school going on, and she has to watch our son on top of that. We need free childcare. We need free childcare to free up working women so they can go to school. They can have some free time. They're not going crazy. And even with this pandemic, I think that's a very that's kind of what public education is. It's free childcare.
Yeah.
But we need to expand that to ages 1 through 5, and maybe even on the summers as well, to stop the oppression of women, because it's women that are forced to because men can easily find better jobs and some of the cultural stuff. It's women that are doing the labor that's necessary for a society to raise the next generation of workers. Having someone raised in good health and fed and safe ultimately benefits the capitalist, because that's another worker, that's another body to build up their system. So this should be taken care of. This work in the domestic sphere should be taken out and given as a public resources and valued and brought into the economy so it has value on it. And what the bourgeois try to do is it's the man's fault he doesn't help you with the kids. It's they start doing divisions amongst men and women. Saying it's their sexism, it's their backwardsness, instead of aptly implementing institutions to get rid of patriarchic oppression.
Mm-hmm. No, and I see that. I mean, it's like, my mother divorced my stepdad because she was unhappy of him being gone all the time. But it's like, it's the system that is setting this up to fail. I just hate how capitalism is just making families just fall apart. Because I can remember back, very early on, like really when I was really little, just how close my family used to be. But after the 2008 recession and after COVID and everything, my family's nowhere near as close anymore. Family members are getting a divorce. We're not really talking to each other anymore, and we're not helping out each other because we're all worried about our own security.
Right on, man. It's like the working class is put in a pressure cooker. We have to work these long hours. We have to go away from our jobs. Maybe we have to get involved in the underground economy. We're not given any education. And then this applies to the subject of safety. The bourgeoisie always try to blame all the problems on the working class. They try to blame us. The reason why there's racism in this country is because of poor rednecks. The reason why there's sexism in this country is because of macho guys who oppress their women or what have you. So, and when reality, when they have these systems of economic exploitation, they're making the conditions to make these things a reality and make these problems work harder. So if we instead of like fighting amongst ourselves, we need to build power and demand systemic change and improvement in the material conditions. And I was talking about safety. Basically, every safety thing they do in the workplace is simply to take blame off of the company and put it onto the worker. Basically, so if you do this, this, and this, it's your fault because you were unsafe. And they're not changing those unsafe conditions that create us or incentivize to do those unsafe behaviors.
And I think that's funny because at that factory I was telling you I was working at, that one Death Trap, like the presses that we were using, I forget what they're called, but the machines that we were using were so old. I mean, they're from the 50s. In fact, they're so old they had made in Detroit on them. I forget what they're called, but and it's like these things are always, falling apart. I remember I saw one guy lose his pinky finger because he had to go in and reposition the part in there so that it would press down and take out the unneeded metal out correctly. And it just came down, sliced off his finger. And, it's like they don't want to invest in new equipment. But in the same instance, they're also losing product. I mean, they're also not losing product, they're losing profit because this equipment's so old, and they have to then pay OSHA fines. But also the fact that, most of the stuff that we were pushing out at the end of the line, it wasn't any good. There are scratches and imperfections. So then you're going back through and doing it again and again and again. And then we get blamed for not pushing out quick enough. Well, I'm sorry. I'm working at a breakneck speed. I get there and I forget how much time's gone by. I get there and I get off. I'm working so quick that, it's almost like, I just got there. You're telling me I'm not working quick enough, but you can't invest in, some new machinery. Your shit's from the 60s, man. Okay. It's going to stop working. It says made in Detroit. I'm pretty sure we don't make these things in Detroit anymore. Okay.
Oh, I hear you, man.
Oh God. Yeah, and there needs to be also another thing is that there needs to be a lot of investment in this country. Some of these factories are from like the 70s or something. The one I'm working at right now is from the 70s, and it's absolutely falling apart. There's holes in the ceilings. When it rains, the rainwater comes right through the ceiling, and sometimes that damages the product. And you gotta work on it again, and then it's our fault for not putting it in this specific area where it doesn't come down. Well, I'm sorry, but I don't think it's our fault. I think it's more the fault of the roof, which is designed to not let this happen. Put some money and investment in this place.
Right on equipment's a big deal. There's a lot of stuff. Just the way and overworking us is a safety concern. Swing shifts. All this stuff. I mean, the trucking industry, we've been worked so bad, like going back to the 40s, they implemented hours of regulation. And in reality, when you get out in the workforce, basically it's company policy for most companies to lie on their clock, to work off the on-duty clock. Basically, when you're delivering, you log, it's plausible that it's plausible unloading time of 30 minutes. So if it actually takes you 4 or 5 hours to load or unload, because we're doing pace work, you log it as 30 minutes. And next thing you know, we're supposed to be working in a 14-hour shift. That turns into a 16, an 18-hour shift. And this is back to back to back for long areas of time. And it's almost like when they implemented those safety rules, it wasn't about the safety of the truck drivers. It wasn't about the money of the truck drivers. It was simply basically for public safety. Basically, well, you have to comply by these basic safety laws. Maybe you get around them. Maybe you got works around them that way, because I guess truck drivers were just killing people. They would just ride them to death. There's a good movie about Hoffa. It's called Hoffa. It's from the 90s. And he got Danny DeVito on there putting cigarettes in his hands. Hoffa looks at him and like, I know you why you got them burns on your hands. And he's putting cigarettes and just inching him down every little. That way, if he falls asleep, it will go down there and burn on him, so he wakes back up. That's going back to the 40s in the truck industry, and they implemented hours of service, and basically the laws haven't really changed months since the 40s and 50s. They tweak on it here and there. I think the big thing for trucker safety will be they need to get off of pace work, by the mile, percentage of load, and go into hourly. And do hourly pay. That's what they do in Europe. That's what they do in other places. But that's going to be a complete restructuring of the industry, and there's already a driver shortage. I mean, that you got to build power to get that demand.
While that may make working conditions better, do you think that you would, in the end, just get a lower wage, or how do you think that would work?
I think any time pace work hourly is always better than pace work. Mm-hmm. Pace work can always be a race to the bottom, because when you got pace work, everyone's working as fast as they can. And everyone's working as fast as they can get rid of the so-called slow people, and they can keep the wages the same or lower that wage. Like, hourly is always better than pace. If you have any power, if you have a union, always push for hourly work over pace.
All right, I can see what you're talking about. I'm running out of things to talk about, Dust. Do you got anything you want to talk about? If not, we can go to the comment section, see if they want to talk about anything. If not, we can end it here. I've had a good conversation with you regardless.
All right, man. I mean, I'm so happy to be on here. I watch. I think we it has a few interactions on Facebook.
Yeah.
It's very cool. I think it's beautiful to see rural workers learning about socialism and communism, because socialism and communism has been associated with the Democrats and with petty bourgeois liberals who have nothing to do with socialism.
No,
it's the working class that's going to do it. So, it's really glad to see you. And I think it is oppression and material conditions that push people towards socialism and communism. So we need to start talking in the language and having an appeal to where, rural workers are. You got these folks, they got their own little culture going down there in the city, and they come out and they're absolutely disgusted by the workers' culture. But you got to talk to them where they're at, understand them, and serve the people, and bring about and spread socialism and communism.
Yeah, and I noticed that too. You get from city dwellers and whatnot, you get a lot of, this elitism for these stupid, dumb rednecks living in trailers and shit. It's just like, fuck off, man. Okay. I remember when I was in high school, I was visiting a friend who was living in a trailer park, and they're like, don't step over that plank. And I was like, why? Oh, that's where the meth lab is. And it's like, but if you were to talk to a liberal about that, they'd be like, oh, these stupid fucking white trash, they can't get a job, too lazy or some shit. This is why West Virginia is on, this is like something that one of my family members said to me, who's like a liberal. This is why most of West Virginia is on welfare, because they're all lazy, dumb hicks. I just looked at him. I was like, can you shut the fuck up? You wonder why there's this huge cultural drift, and you're not helping it. You have to actually look at what's causing this. Why, my friend's father is cooking them has a fucking meth lab underneath the goddamn floorboards.
There's a singer, man. I'm really into country music and underground country music.
Same.
Ziggy Pockets got this song called "God Bless West Virginia," and it's really good. I think it talks about they started cooking for. There's a lyric. They started cooking for a habit, and now there's money for the rent and things. It's like that's why people are forced in the underground community, and it ain't like they're really going to try to stop it, because drugs destroy the community. I mean, this goes back. This is the opium wars that the British waged against the Chinese in the modern day. And it started in the black community. They first deindustrialized urban jobs. They first pushed black workers, and they introduced crack cocaine. And they had this massive prison system, the largest prison population on earth. And then now it's reached rural America. It has reached white rural America, the opioids, methamphetamines. It's just all structures and legal systems to keep down and exploit the people.
Oh, definitely, because, it kind of goes back to the Bolsheviks, and a lot of people don't know that the Bolsheviks were a prohibition party all the way up to their dissolution in the 90s. They're very anti-alcohol. And under the pretext that, you can't have revolution, you can't see your material and social conditions if, you're drunk as shit, or in this case, if you're high as shit.
Right on, man.
All right. Well, you got anything else to add, Dust?
Yeah, if I could put a few plugs in there. If people want to, I got a YouTube channel. I do a weekly show with an Australian comrade, a labor organizer, David Fox, and we do basically a communist work meeting in show form. We call it Working Class Revolt. We start out with news updates, labor aid updates. We interview guests. And about an hour from now, we're going to be interviewing Oscar from the Marxist think tank. He's going to be on. And if you want to find my channel, just Google Dust James Anti-Imperialist America, and you'll find my YouTube page.
All right. Well, if nobody else in the comment section, which comment section looks dead. So, but if anybody else has anything to say, anything? No. All right. Well, it's been great having you here, James.
Same to you, man. Good talk.
Yeah, you too.